so good.
Okay, Isaac, do your from yesteryear. Everybody, say hello to Julia. Come on, Isaac. You always just say peace out, Julia, or what?
No, that was the underclass type thing.
That was an underclass type thing. All right. Hopefully, Julia, you can hear me, and hopefully the video's working. All right. 6 dominant worldviews. Quiz tomorrow. You just got to know these 6 words to start off UTT with 100%. Don't even have to be in order. The 6 dominant worldviews about God. Remember, this whole idea is we're studying worldviews and how they see God, how they see man, how they see man's relationship to God and to one another. That's what this whole thing's about. How you think about these things is your worldview. You could say you're a Marxist, you could say you're a Christian, you could say you're a Buddhist, but how you actually live is who you actually are. So your worldview plays out, manifests itself in your actions, right? And the things that not just that you say you believe in, but that you actually put into play. The choices that you make, the way you behave, the habits that you create in your life. That says a lot about who you really are. And what are they? Anybody know? Somebody try to rattle off all 6 before we put it up there. Tomorrow you have a quiz. All you got to do is write these 6 words, and you start off with 100%. Go ahead. 6 dominant worldviews. I thought you had a hand up. Secularism.
You want me to name all 6?
Yeah.
Postmodernism.
Postmodernism. Marxism.
New spirituality.
Yep.
Islamic.
Outstanding. Look at that.
This guy.
This is 4.0.
This is my 4.0. This is my year.
Let's go, man. All right, so that's what you got to know. That's where we left off on, what day would that have been? Thursday? Right? I don't know if it was this class or the other one that somebody, we started to have a deeper conversation about the Trinity and how we understand it, because it's very difficult to understand. So doing what I do in my spare time, I was going through stuff anyway, watching things. So I came across this. I wasn't even seeking it. So I copied the link, but we don't have time to do it now. Maybe a discussion time later, if you wanted to continue that discussion about trying to get a better understanding of what the Trinity is. Some people have difficulty with that. Okay, 10 areas of life that affect us all. These are the 10 disciplines that, whether you're in school or not, these areas of life affect everybody. And how do we see these areas of life? How do we approach economics? How do we approach politics? That's a manifestation of our worldview. The first one is theology. Oh, by the way, we start off the first couple weeks here, and I like to use the term 30,000-foot view. So we're just looking at these 16 things, the worldviews and the 10 disciplines, and we're just given a real quick bullet point phrase to say what they are, and then we'll zoom in today. We'll zoom in to a bird's eye view, and then we'll tackle them all like right there on the street corner. Philosophy. Philosophy actually, if you translated it literally from the Greek, it would be love of wisdom. Right? Remember brotherly love? What's the city of brotherly love?
Philadelphia.
Philadelphia. So
Liberty
philo,
Bell.
philo is love. A brotherly type love. So you love wisdom. You want to be a friend of wisdom. You desire, seek wisdom. Study of knowledge, reality, and existence. People that spend their time, they get really curious about why things are the way they are. Philosophers. Ethics. Remember, integrity is everything, right? So, what guides a person's behavior? What governs your behavior? Do you live according to certain moral principles? Of course, as Christians, we strive to live according to the commands and precepts of God. So, we've got the 10 Commandments, we've got all the other commandments, we've got the 2 greatest commandments, right? And if we live according to that, we believe that we will live ethical, moral lives. What about the people that don't share the belief in what we believe in? What principles are guiding their behavior? We live in a world with them. So we need to understand how they take. Biology. Something you already know. Look, it's a couple of these you didn't even have to think about. Theology, study of God. Biology, study of life. Psychology. By the way, I should have put it up there, but next to the word mind, in parentheses, put the word soul. Because actually, just like philosophy, if you were to translate psychology literally, it's the study of the soul. You know, you are body, spirit, soul. You have a brain, which is physical, but you have a mind, right, which is not physical, abstract. So the study of your mind is really a study of soul. So when we look at psychology, does it matter? If you're having a problem with something with your mind, does it matter if you seek help from a Christian or not? Should you look for the advice and counsel of Christian psychologists? Or does any old psychologist do? What worldview would they be bringing into the situation that you're seeking help with? Matters. Sociology. Study of structure and function of society, how people relate to one another. We don't have an actual class here called sociology, although some high schools do. In fact, UTT kind of serves as an offshoot of sociology. If we had a class called that, with my social studies, they were actually able to teach psychology too. But sociology is a field that you can go into that will lead to probably what you would imagine, social work. So, of course, study of society. Law. Even as Christians who would rather just follow God, and sometimes we're at odds with the secular government, we still realize that government and laws and the people that are in authority are ordained by God, so we need laws, right? Wouldn't it be great if we didn't have to live according to rules or laws because we all had self-discipline and self-control? I don't think anyone in here believes in anarchy, do you? Politics. Whether we like it or not, politics affects our lives. In American politics, we have a republic, so we have the power to choose, elect who we want to put in positions to make decisions about how we utilize our resources. Economics is going to be the next discipline we look at, but it's not just economics, right? Politicians have more to deal with than just how we distribute and utilize our money and natural resources. How do we utilize everybody's skills? Does it matter that the people that are making these decisions have a biblical worldview or not? Could you have a functional, successful, at least physically successful country, society, with or without a Christian worldview? Economics, just like last year, what was it? What are we going to make? What were those three questions? How are we going to make it? And who's going to, the transfer of wealth. Who's going to benefit from what we make? And how we make it? Most modern societies that we look at and we see them as economically successful, which class is the largest? Middle class, right? Because those societies have endeavored to make it so that the transfer of wealth, the distribution of wealth, is more equitable than not. Like in America, there's a lot of people that complain and lament about the 1%, right? You do have a lot of super wealthy people in America, and you do have a lot of impoverished people, but for the most part, we talked last year about most people, probably 90% of the people see themselves as not low class or high class, but middle class, right? And that is kind of a identifying marker of a stable, functional society. That people generally see the transfer of wealth as equitable. Make sense? Of course, we as Christians, how do we view that? We don't like to see anyone impoverished or go in need. So part of our worldview is outside of politics and economics. We take it upon ourselves to help those people in need because that's something we do individually, right? We also, do we say that because we're Christian, we don't think that we hate the rich? Does the Bible tell us that money in and of itself is the root of evil and that all rich people are evil? Or is it the love of money? That if money supersedes every other motivation in your life, well then that would be evil. But what if with your resources and your accumulation, because of your excellent work, you accrue more resources and then you, on your own, without government telling you, distribute those resources and help people and transfer your wealth to those in need. History. Study of past events. This does affect your life. Whether you like politics or you like history or not, it affects our lives. And if we have people that we elect in America to put in positions of power and influence, and they don't know history, then they're not going to be people that are able to learn from the past. They're going to try to implement things that have already been tried and found to be unsuccessful. In some cases, 0% success rate. So you need to know it. You need to know that what they're trying to do is not ever been successful. Questions, comments? Huh? So you don't have to know these 10 for tomorrow. You just got to know the 6 dominant worldviews. 6 words, 100%. Everybody starts UTQ with. Who went to the fair? You never went. Oh. I escaped. I won this.
You what?
I won. There you go. Too much money. You're so cheap. Okay, we zoom in. Not totally zoomed in. We just go from 30,000 feet to a bird's eye view, like, okay, we're getting a little better idea of what these things are. So, for instance, secularism, all we wrote so far was what? It's an atheistic worldview, right? That they don't believe in God at all. What else about secularism? To get a little closer to what a secularist is, you probably at some point in your life have heard these two words used together, right? Secular humanism. Is there anyone in here that's never heard that phrase before? Probably not. Secular humanism. They go together. Because a secularist doesn't believe in God, where do they put their trust and hope and belief? Hello? In man, in humans, right? There's no need for God. Hey, we got this. We're the top of the food chain. We have accrued all of this knowledge and technology that we have. And the more technology we get, it seems, the less we need God, right? No one's doing rain dances out there hoping for the rains to come for their harvest to be abundant so they can feed themselves, because we're way beyond that now, right? Because of human ingenuity, we've got all of these things that make life so comfortable. When I came in this morning, it was 78 in here, and I just hit a little switch, and now it's down to 73, so it's much more comfortable than when I first got in here, because, hey, we got this. And if we have any other further needs, guess what? We can depend on our human intellect, ingenuity, to create everything that we need, and therefore, in their eyes, there's no need for God. It's all about us and what we do, the decisions we make. There's no need to go outside of our own capabilities. Look what we have done. Is there some truth that we've created this world of comfort? Yes? Can you see how some people, and can you also see how the more we do develop as humans, the more technology we do get? Can you see how that affects the society at large? How we've gone from 90% of the people saying they're Christian just when I was your age to now under 70%, just over 60%, because people are living in, there's people your age growing up outside of your situation in Christian homes. They're like, what do we need God for? We got everything we need. And if we need something else, guess what? We'll just invent something else. Right? By the way, when it comes to humanism, this is a very small percentage of the population. Not trying to scare you, but just make you aware that there are people out there, and they have some wealth backing them. Has anybody ever heard of this term? Transhumanism. Not transgender. Transhumanism. That there are people actively working right now, thankfully there's a very small percentage, but you need to be aware of them, that are working towards the idea. It's not a conspiracy theory. They're actually, and the whole idea, this isn't to put down robotics or even AI. I mean, AI is just kind of a fun little toy for you right now, for us, right? Hey, we got ChatGPT, we can go on and ask it a question, it'll give us an answer. But there are people that are working and sincerely hoping to develop a world that goes beyond even humanism to the best, most perfect world. A more perfect world would be if there were less humans in control, because we're imperfect, right? And if we create beings that are able to make the decisions and do all these things that are even better than humans, wouldn't that be an even better world? Of course, they reject God, anything beyond what we can examine with our five senses. When we do that, thing with the hand, what we hear, what we see, what we can smell, touch, taste, that's the only thing that matters. If you can't test it, if it's not experimentally, if you can't prove it through experimental science, well then, we reject all that. We put our full faith and trust in science and what humans have developed through science. Like last year, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. You can never scientifically, we talked about, prove to someone, scientifically, of course, I mean proof, total proof, because God hasn't revealed himself to us in that way, that there's a God. You can show them all the evidence, but their worldview is going to determine, when they look at that evidence, what they believe. And if you come at it with this idea that there's no need for God, well, then you're going to reject. You're going to call, here's the other thing, you're going to call, those people are going to call what you believe as just your faith. That's just because your religion tells you. Well, the next thing on the notes says, is secularism non-religious? The question mark next to it is kind of rhetorical. No, secularism isn't non-religious. Secularism is a religion in and of itself. Secular humanism is a religion. They religiously follow this idea about God and man and their relationship to one another and man's relationship to man. They follow the principles of their belief system religiously.
So, what if they're learning about that?
That's it. That's it. What do you mean? You are only physical, so you're physical. Don't you know science and about decay? Decomposition? Okay. Yeah. Of course. What else would there be? Can you prove anything beyond that, Rachel? No, can you prove it? Can with our five senses, can you prove that, for instance, the people that we've loved that have passed, can you prove that anything's happened except their bodies decaying in the ground? Or if they were... No. So then they rejected it. Yeah, it's a sad way to live. Marxism, closely related to secularism because of their ideas about God and their atheistic ideas that there is no God, there's no need for God. In fact, there's no spiritual realm at all. Which thankfully, there's not that many people that are really strictly humanist or Marxist, because no matter how skepticism comes into postmodernism, which is next, no matter how skeptical people are, you can get a lot of people to believe in certain, people will tell stories about, even if they're not Christian or quote unquote religious in that aspect at all, but they've got these stories about something that's happened to them that's supernatural, right? So most people don't fall into a real strict, hard line, there is no spiritual realm at all category. Does that make sense? Because they might believe that there are things that happen supernaturally. Even if you are a Marxist, you can probably get some of them to believe some story that you've heard or you're telling that there's no explanation for this scientifically. There's some other force, or, Star Wars, right? The Force. There's a force. There's a universal force, even if they're not a Christian or even a new spiritualist that thinks everything's spiritual, that you could probably get at least a starting point to talk to someone about. There's some force outside of our five senses that you probably get them down the path towards God by saying, giving them examples of things that happen. That there is no explanation. Okay, how do you explain this? How do you explain that? You can't measure it, you can't experiment it, do an experiment about it. You can't measure it with your five senses, but it did occur, it has occurred. Marxism is like secularism, except it's more refined by the teachings of its namesake, Karl Marx. Who, by the way, was just a, unpopular, I don't know if you call him a nerd, what do you call him these days? Kind of an outcast, but wrote his writings, had a friend who had a little more financial backing to help him produce his book. What's a simple word I'm looking for? Publish his book called Communist Manifesto in 1848, and here we are, we're 175 years later, and even though his ideas have been tried for 175 years by dozens of societies and countries, and their success rate is 0, you have to deal with people in your generation that are gonna try it again and are trying it right now and believing in it, even though its success rate is 0, and even though we can demonstrate through the 20th century, 100 years after his teachings take hold, so the first 100 years of, hey, let's see what happens when we try to implement Marxist teaching, and we can demonstrate that 100 million people have died because of these things being implemented, either been killed or starved to death, or however way they died for political reasons or economic reasons. They still want to try it because they're going to tell you that it's not Marxism that's bad. Marxism isn't bad. There's just been bad Marxists. Communism isn't bad. It's just been implemented in the wrong way. There's been bad communists. Trust us. Every generation has to go through this, and you're going to have to face it, and we're going to have to conquer it again. If you go back to my generation, when I was your age, I was growing up in the Cold War, and we had to crush the idea of communism throughout the world. You remember learning about that, right? Most of the world was lined up behind America as the free market, capitalist, liberty-loving nations, and then you had the other half of the world lined up under the Soviet Union, and the idea that communism was the way to go, right? So we defeated that. We won the Cold War. Well, every generation's got to deal with it because it's rising again. And there's many people in your age group that are buying into it again. That we just haven't done it right yet. Even if you can show them the most recent places that have tried it, like Venezuela. Venezuela went from the richest South American country by far to total economic devastation in a matter of like 15 years. Now, some people might say, well, they're always talking about China being communist, and look how good they're doing. Well, the secret to that is the people that are in control in China of the Chinese Communist Party, what's interesting is they don't use Marxist ideology for their gaining wealth. They use capitalism. State capitalism. They've become who they are as a force in the world because they gained all this wealth by using capitalist ideas. And now they've accrued that wealth, and the wealth is unfortunately in the hands of very few because they implement their communist ideas, which is closely related to Marxism. Socialism and Marxism. Socialism is kind of the economic force, Marxist socialism, and then communism is the government force that heavy-handedly dictates to the masses how they're going to live. Am I making sense? So China has risen to the power that they are and are rivaling basically the United States for, how to say, authority in the world. The United States for, 100 years, 80 years, has enjoyed the idea that we are the leading force economically and militarily, and therefore, since we are good people, that's a good thing for the world, that we who believe in liberty and God, basically, generally speaking, that if we have the most influence in the world's a better place, right? And there's a fear that if these people become the most influential in the world will not be a better place, because they will implement those things that are the antithesis to what created the greatest, freest, most prosperous country in the world. Because even with their wealth, the people of China do not enjoy what we enjoy as far as freedom and even economic affluence.
One question.
Yeah.
Hypothetically, since we owe them a whole bunch of money, so that is that money over us if they're-
Well, right. So there's a lot of people that are like, when we continue to go into these trade deficits with China, and we allow them to finance our $32 trillion of debt, right? A big part of that is our indebtedness to China. Then aren't we kind of? Don't they control us then? Well, little side editorial. If we actually have individual politicians that they financially control. That makes it even worse, doesn't it?
That's what's
Just
going
saying. If we have individual politicians in very influential places in our government that are individually financed by the CCP, then we're in greater trouble. According to the Marxists, I gotta go fast. History is basically this, okay? History is basically, all of history is a struggle between those that have and those that have not. And there's a struggle for the resources of the world. Is this not true? Isn't that kind of basically true, right? There's always been this struggle between, okay, here's the resources of a certain society, who's controlling them? And almost always, because people are greedy, certain people take control of most of the resources, and the masses are left to, I guess, hope that the people that control them are kind enough to redistribute the wealth. But the Marxists would say, if we don't put a governance on the rich people, then they would their greediness would spiral out of control, and they would buy up everything, and we'd just all be left impoverished. Because human nature is greedy, is it not? Does a Christian also believe that our human nature is to be greedy, selfish? Andy probably can't remember, but she was probably surely just like most of us. When she was like 2, she everything was mine. You know, have you recently watched a 2-year-old? Because I get the benefit of doing it again here, 20 some years later, and gets very upset when you tell him it's not his, or we're basically very selfish and greedy, aren't we? At our core, as our nature. Christianity teaches that we have a sinful nature, right? So what are we going to do about it? The Marxists say we've got to have rules and laws that make it so people can't carry out their greed and selfishness. We got to make it so that all animals are equal. Doesn't that sound like the perfect world? We're all equal. But they forget about the other part of human nature. What's the other part of human nature that Orwell tried to teach you in junior high? Yeah, all animals are equal. You go ahead and every time that's been tried, what do you find out? What's the second part to that saying? All animals are equal, except, come on, what? Some animals are more equal than others. Because that's the other part of human nature that just as we, we're not done, just as we have this human nature be greedy and selfish when it comes to money and material things, guess what? It's also in our human nature to be selfish and want control of other people. So every time that they've tried this in history and they got this utopian idea that they're going to implement the perfect society where there's no more class struggle, everybody's the same, it doesn't work. Because people's natural proclivity to want to control and their greed leads them to all animals are equal, some animals are more equal than others. You all understand, right? Was it Napoleon? Was it Napoleon that was in charge? It's been so long since I read the book. So, listen, you all understand. Somebody's got to be in control here. And I've told you, or maybe you've seen the Google Earth picture of, say, North Korea today, right? The modern example, like today, you go to Google Earth at night and you see that North Korea, because of communism and their lack of wealth, and they can't really grow their economy and keep up with countries like the United States because capitalism doesn't just, remember I showed you last year, it's not just one pie and we each get a little piece. Capitalism creates more pies. Well, North Korea with their communist regime, they got to ration all their resources. So you look at it and you've got pitch dark except one little dot where, what's his name? Just lost his name. Kim Jong-un, right? It's not going to be dark where he's at. So they're looking for heaven on earth because they don't believe in heaven, right? They want to create this utopian society on earth. And if people would just follow his teachings, we'd be okay. Remember, in their eyes, communism isn't bad, it's just that we've had bad communists. Hey, just 6 words tomorrow. Peace out, Julia. Hopefully that worked.